Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I hope you had a fantastic Christmas holiday. For some, we're still in the midst of holiday. I'm going to enjoy a couple of days here and take a little bit of time off. This is a time of year when my ministry sort of kind of slows down in some ways. I'm able to work on the old cars, as you can see back here. Okay, well, let me see here. Yeah, okay. uh, this car that you see right here, and boy, that's tough to do looking at it on the opposite. Everything's opposite on my screen here. So anyway, this car right here is a scale model of a car that I actually own. It's a 1969 Mustang Mach 1, true R code, 428 Cobra Jet car. And I'm in the process, like up to here, in trying to get it restored. It's an extremely slow process because it just takes so much money to do. I don't have that kind of money to just jump in and do it. And so, I'm doing a little bit, and I've been working on it for like 5 years after a garage fire. And so, anyway, for the next few days, I get to work on my Mustang. Again, I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. Hope Santa brought you what you wanted. I was hoping that Santa would leave a brand new Shelby GT500 Super Snake in my driveway. For some reason, that didn't happen. I mean, I know why, but but anyway, all of that jesting and joking aside, I do hope that you had a fantastic Christmas. I hope that you had your family in. I hope you enjoyed the warmth of family fellowship, the joy, the laughter. There's just nothing like having family around us and enjoying that time. And so, again, hope you had a great time. We are looking at, as we continue our examination of the challenge of Christ. Do you remember what the challenge of Christ is? The challenge of Christ is expressed by him in John 10:37 and following. Do not believe me for my words' sake, Jesus said. Believe me for my works. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. Now, I've shared with you before, I've talked to an awful lot of people, and I talk to an awful lot of Christian people, and when you ask them to prove their faith, pardon me, I've had them say, I don't have to offer proof. I just believe. Well, according to the book of Hebrews chapter 11, faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. In order to have a properly grounded faith, yes, indeed, we must have evidence. Now, do I have, quote, empirical evidence? Empirical means something that I can touch, that I can feel, that I can literally see, that I can literally hear, that I can smell, etc. That's empirical evidence. Well, no, we don't have empirical evidence that we today can reach out and touch, for instance, in regard to the resurrection of Jesus. But we've got tons and tons of circumstantial and historical evidence. I was reading an article by a Jewish rabbi just the other day who was saying the tomb was not empty. Really? Okay, then where's the body? The tomb is empty. And the fabrications that have been given by the enemies of Christ down through the centuries to explain that empty tomb, to explain the birth of the Christian faith. I mean, think about it. How in the world does your leader get crucified? His closest followers abandon him, And then just 50 days later, they supposedly, ostensibly, they get together and say, hey, you know, guys, we could come up, boy, we could start a brand new religion. All we got to do is lie. All we got to do is make up a story that our leader, the one that we actually know is dead, oh, and by the way, the one that we managed to slip into the garden, get past the Roman guards, get past the Jewish guards, roll away the stone, we stole his body. I tell you, the excuses, the fabrications, the attempts to destroy and to deny the resurrection of Jesus are really, honestly, quite astounding. But enough of that. So here is Jesus in his challenge. If he doesn't do what the Father gave him to do, we are not to believe in him. I hope by now, after these several months of me sharing with you this challenge, I hope that you have begun to take it seriously. We are living in a time in which far, far, far too many, quote, Christians, unquote, who in fact are nothing more than pew packers. I'm not trying to be unkind here, but their faith, their understanding of their faith, their understanding of biblical truth is less than paper thin. They could not and they cannot do what Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 and following. Sanctify Christ in your heart and be ready always to give an answer for the faith that lies within you. Now, here's something you need to understand. That word answer is from the Greek word apologia. We get our word apology. Now, unfortunately, we think an apology is saying, oh, I'm awfully sorry. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to hurt you, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that's one definition that has developed over the years. But in the context of 1 Peter, apologia means, and it is a legal, judicial term. It carries with it the idea of being on trial. And the judge says, okay, here's what you've been accused of. You need to give an apology for your faith. And he's not saying you need to apologize for what you believe in. No. That's not what Peter's doing. An apology in the first century was that the person giving an apology when they're on trial, like Peter and John in Acts 4, Acts 5, when they're in front of the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin tells them, why are you preaching in Jesus the resurrection of the dead? Why are you doing that? And Peter and John stand up and say, well, here's why. Here's what we believe. Here's why we believe it. That's an apology. And so Peter, in full agreement with Jesus, and by the way, he's writing in a time of persecution, says, you know what, if you're brought before judges, before governors, before kings, before Sanhedrins, as Jesus said they would be, and they were. So here's Peter saying, okay, if you're brought up on trial for believing in Christ, you must sanctify. What does the word sanctify mean? It means set Christ apart in your heart, in your mind, have the evidence, be able and understand who Jesus is, what he said, if it's true or not. You must be able to present the evidence. Now look, Peter's not saying we all have to be doctors of philosophy and epistemology. But we have to know what we believe and why. That's what Peter's saying. I'll never forget some years ago, and getting ready to get back into study the Transfiguration, Some years ago, some of us were seated around a table drinking coffee together, and there was a fellow there that was a television producer, and a man in our group was likewise a producer, had been in television for years. We started talking about our backgrounds, and this new fella was asked by our man, why are you a Methodist? That's what he had said he was. And the man sat there with a stunned look on his face, literally stunned. And finally he goes, you know what? I have no earthly idea why I'm a Methodist. And, we're all sitting there going, well, that's quite an admission. And he said, I'm ashamed to say it, but he said, I literally do not know why I am a Methodist. Mom and Dad are Methodist. But he said, that's not an excuse. So once again, will we accept the challenge of Christ? That challenge of Christ is to look at what he said he was going to do, when he said he was going to do it, and to bring our beliefs, our concepts of the nature of what he said he was going to do into harmony with the time in which he said he was going to do it. And what we have been doing is examining just one. Now look, there are tons of others, but we're going to be looking at those, but we've been focusing on Matthew 16, 27 and 28, where Jesus said, the Son of Man, that's him, pardon me, will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according as his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, I've been sharing with you how those verses have caused countless numbers of people actually to lose their faith. How so? Because they believe that the coming of Christ is an earth-burning, time-ending event at the end of human history. But Jesus said it was going to happen before all of those people that were standing there died. Well, we are told, Jesus didn't come and destroy the cosmos. Jesus didn't come out of heaven riding a literal cumulus cloud with all of the angels attending. Jesus didn't come in judgment of all humanity in the lifetime of that first century generation. Therefore, just as the atheists, the Jews, the Muslims tell us today, Jesus failed. Or he just flat out lied. Or maybe, just maybe he was well-intentioned, but deluded. Men like Albert Schweitzer tried to take that view, that Jesus unequivocally expected the end, the arrival of the kingdom, the inbreaking of God's reign into the world in his lifetime, and he was certainly disappointed. Just flat disappointed. And his disciples were deeply, deeply disappointed. All of these books back behind me, virtually all of them say this: Jesus didn't come when he said he was going to come. That's your challenge and mine, to find out, did Jesus fail? Did Jesus lie? Was he deluded? So an awful lot of people, when they come to this passage in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, they try to find an explanation for this supposed failure, and they say, we've got the solution. Jesus didn't fail. Jesus didn't lie. He wasn't deluded, because after all, in Matthew chapter 17, we have the story of the Transfiguration. I shared with you last week. You know, in my estimation, the Transfiguration is without a doubt one of the most awe-inspiring, incredible events recorded in the New Testament. It is without a doubt one of the most significant eschatological events found in the New Testament. Why is that? Well, because Peter said that the Transfiguration was a vision of Christ's parousia, his coming, his second coming. As you're going to see as we talk about the Transfiguration a good little bit, the significance of the Transfiguration for understanding the nature and the timing is absolutely incredible. Let's read together, shall we? We read it last week. I hope you have read it again since we went over it. And let's read it again. Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shined like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. That's the light of the sun, probably. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. And when his disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise, do not be afraid. When they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus. Jesus only. Now, as they came down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. What a staggering, challenging statement that he made to them. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Jesus answered and said to them, Indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. But I say to you, please catch the power of this, Elijah has come already. And they did not know him, but did to him whatsoever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hand. And then the disciples understood. Understood what? Understood that when he said Elijah has already come, he spoke to them about John the Baptizer. John was Elijah. And we're gonna develop this more as we go along. So here's the argument that is given. Jesus, in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, said, The Son of Man will come, and the glory of the Father, with his angels, shall reward every man according as his works. And there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now look, just 6 days later, he was transfigured, and they saw him. They saw a vision of his coming. They saw a vision of his parousia. Wow. Therefore, the Transfiguration is the fulfillment of his promise to come in the lifetime of that audience. Problem solved. Or so we are told. Unfortunately, that will not work. Notice that Jesus said, See that you do not tell the vision to any man. Now wait a minute. In Matthew 16, 27, 28, Jesus did not say Verily I say unto you, there are some that standing here that shall not taste of death until they see a vision of me coming. But you see, that's of necessity what this attempted explanation demands. Jesus did not say, let me reiterate this because you really, honestly have to catch the power of this. In Matthew 16, 27 and 28, Jesus is making an objective prophecy, or a prophecy of objective reality. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man. Some standing here shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming. So, to reiterate, to reemphasize, Jesus did not say, hey guys, in just a few days, some of you are going to see a vision of what I just predicted. Now, make no mistake, the Transfiguration is related to what he predicted. Make no mistake, the Transfiguration was a vision of what he predicted, but according to 2 Peter chapter 1, 16 and following, a passage we're going to examine in depth later on, the Transfiguration was a visionary confirmation, a visionary guarantee of the fulfillment of Matthew 16, 27 and 28. It was not the fulfillment, it was a vision of fulfillment. You see the difference? And there's something else here. Now, I'm only going to mention this ever so briefly right here, but I want you to notice, and again, we will develop this a great deal later on as we continue. Jesus' prediction in Matthew 16, 27 and 28 is a continuation of his discussion that goes all the way back to verse 18 and following, in which Jesus said, whom do men say that I am? Well, some say you're John, some say you're Jeremiah or some other prophet, you know. Well, who do you say that I am? And Peter said, well, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And then Jesus began immediately to teach them. He was going into Jerusalem, there be betrayed, crucified, buried, raised from the dead. And he also promised them, he warned them, they were going to be persecuted. But what verse 27 promises is his coming in vindication, number one, of his own suffering, of his own unjust crucifixion, but likewise his coming in vindication of their suffering. Let me say that again. That's really important. Matthew 16, 27 and 28 is a prediction of Jesus' coming in vindication of the suffering that his apostles and anyone who would follow him that were standing there that day, you know, that they would experience as they followed him. I mean, after all, you know, he said, if any man take up his cross and follow me, or if any man would follow me, let him take up his cross daily and follow me. Do you catch that? So here's what I'm saying. Jesus said he was going to suffer and die. His apostles and those others who were present who would follow him, if they were going to follow him, they also had to take up their cross and follow him. And to take up the cross was to be martyred. Look, folks, the cross was not a symbol of simply people saying, you know, I just don't like you very much. No, no. When you were put on the cross, you were going to die. So Jesus promised his disciples they were going to suffer, but he was going to come in vindication of their suffering. Now let me ask you a question. In Matthew 16, in his promise of the vindication of their suffering, had they suffered martyrdom yet? Well, pretty clearly not. 6 days later, had they suffered martyrdom yet? Pretty clearly not. Now, since Jesus' promise of his coming in judgment in the glory of the Father was his promise to come in vindication of their suffering, that meant they had to suffer martyrdom before his coming. That means Matthew 17, the vision of his coming, was not the fulfillment of his promise to come because they had not yet suffered. They had to suffer martyrdom before the fulfillment of Matthew, before the fulfillment of Matthew 16:27. But the Transfiguration vision was prior to their suffering. Therefore, the Transfiguration was not the fulfillment of his promise to come in vindication of their suffering. Hey, listen, don't forget my Merry Christmas offer to you. Go to my website and order these 3 books. Daniel 12, Blast from the Past, Like Father, Like Son. Total delivered price to you, $40, saving you $21. Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. I'll see you next week.